If you're new to interviewing, conducting your very first interview could be a nerve wracking and a scary situation. I faced the same anxiousness sometime back, but by following few steps, I was able to conduct a really smooth interview and pick the best talent out there. So I'm going to share with you these steps that I used in interviewing a technical writer candidate. All the things that I'll be sharing are customized for first time interviewers just like me. Hi, my name is Ishara and I'm from Sri Lanka. I joined the tech industry as a software engineer, but my passion for creating content made me a documentarian. Right now, I work at WSO2 as a senior technical writer. So let's get started. Ever since I joined the tech industry, I have always been on the other side of the interviews, that is, being the interviewee. So, when for the first time I got the opportunity to interview a candidate, I didn't expect it to be a nervous situation for me, for the interviewer. That day only I realized that all the parties that's involved in this entire interviewing process go through this anxiousness and nervousness. Even though it was my first time conducting an interview, I still wanted to give out my best and be the best interviewer possible. So I can help my organization pick a really good candidate and I get to work with a good technical writer too. That's why I put in a lot of effort and started reading on how to conduct interviews and how to be a good interviewer and pick a good technical writer for the team. Sadly, when I refer to all the content that's available online, I didn't find anything useful as an interviewer's point of view, as an interviewer who's selecting technical writers. But on the other hand, there was enough information and tips and guidelines for technical writers who are facing interviews. So I thought, why not make the most of this situation and come up with my own research and own list that could be followed for any future interviewer who's as nervous as me. So in this talk, I'll be talking about few steps and I have ordered them and categorized them based on the order that they came in handy to me and also the phase that they'll be used in. For example, we'll see what you're supposed to do before an interview. First things first, go through your candidate's resume. Have they come up with a really good summarized two-page, which is the industry accepted standard for resume? When you read the resume, can you actually see their true potential? It's something for you to decide. Go through their academic and career history. Also analyze the timelines. And if you have any questions, you can make notes. When you go through their resume, always check the skills that they have listed against the requirements that you have in the job role. This will actually make your task easy. If they don't have a lot of experience, still, if you would like to give them a chance, then you will be able to see what type of other experiences that they have in their profile. Also, in the first glance, do you see any keywords that catch your eye? If so, it's time to dig deep on that particular project or task and learn about the role that the candidate has played on that particular subject. Step number two, check their LinkedIn or any other professional networking profile that is used in your country or region. It is highly important for someone like an IT professional to maintain an updated LinkedIn profile because it shows that they're working on their brand, they're working on their image. So it's time to use your cyber stalking skills and go through their profiles. Do you see continuous professional growth in them? If the answer is yes, it's a green light. And even if you see any inconsistencies, you can definitely note them down and have a talk about that during the interviews. These two steps, step number one and step number two, will extremely be helpful when you are doing the background search for the candidate. So, based on these content, you can come up with the questions that you want to ask during the interview session. Now that you know the candidate has a strong online presence and It is a huge advantage, a unique advantage on the candidate themselves. Once you confirm this, now you can see for there any publicly available work. During the interview process, if you haven't received any of their writing samples by now, make this the ideal phase. Use this as the ideal opportunity to read their work that is publicly available. My personal opinion is, as a technical writer, you need to have a portfolio. And if you have a publicly available portfolio, that is much better. It gives the opportunity for anyone that is interested in you to go through your work, read your work, and get to know you even before meeting you. So go through them, get to know their interests, the tools and technologies that they're familiar with, and what their hobbies are and who they are as a person if any of such content is available online. Now you have a basic idea of the candidate. You know whether it's a fresh graduate or a senior tech writer. Now you can actually plan and segment the interview. I'm not talking about coming up with the questions, but this is coming up with an agenda for the interview so that you have a plan for the entire interview session. It could be 30 minutes or 45 minutes, but you know what you're supposed to do. When allocating time, always allocate time for questions and answers. Also, keep in mind if you are conducting an online interview, have a time buffer for the unexpected technical glitches as well, because we never know what could go wrong at that moment. Now you have a lot of things set up and you are in the correct direction. But as the interviewer, you are managing multiple parties, you're handling multiple people as an interviewer, such as your organization, the candidate, your team, and even yourself. So, all of these parties have different expectations from this candidate. You need to be clear and have no doubts with regard to that. And if you do have any, you can talk to the HR manager or your engineering manager and clarify them then and there. Before attending the interviews, you should know what is expected from this role, what are the future tasks that are assigned for this particular role, how does success look for this particular role, and what teams would they be working with, and what is their usual work day would be like. You need to have a clear understanding of these certain aspects before attending an interview. Map the expectations correctly for all stakeholders. That will make the entire process a very smooth one. And for any guidance, don't hesitate to reach to your senior managers because, as a first time interviewer, you have that privilege. So make the most of it, reach them, clarify any doubts, and be a really good interviewer during the interview session. Now you have conducted enough research and you know the candidate basically. So, based on whether they are a senior tech writer or a fresh graduate or whether someone who's switching from a different role, you can come up with customized list of questions. And if you want to get them verified, once you finalize the list from your side, talk to a senior interviewer, such as someone from your engineering team or even the HR team. Go through the questions and make sure that you can ask them and get them answered during the allocated time. Just because you have a script, don't think you're not supposed to be flexible, because you should always be willing to go off script. You're not just planning a question and answering session, because you're supposed to get the candidate more comfortable with the interviewer, that is you, whether there could be multiple interviewers, and get them to talking and engaging with them more. So following a conversational styled interview is much more effective, so that you can get them to open up and engage with you more in a very comfortable manner. Now you know how to prepare for an interview. Let's see what you're supposed to do during the interview. This goes without saying, you need to be friendly, polite, calm, and welcoming. Always start the interview session by introducing yourself, what you're doing at the company, your role, and responsibilities. And for the very first few questions, just to get the candidate very comfortable with you, ask them to introduce themselves, talk about the previous roles, work experience, and even if it's a university student, ask them to talk about the university project that could be related to this particular role, and even their related pet projects. So they get to start speaking and being comfortable with you. Always try to build a personal connection and put extra effort if you're conducting the interviews online, because it's nothing like talking to a person face to face when you're talking to a computer and interviewing someone through the online platform. Let them open up and ask more questions. Never forget that interviews are two-way streets. Just like how we are interviewing them, the candidate also interview us, the organization, to see whether it's a perfect match for them as well. Ask them follow-up questions based on the questions they ask, based on the answers they provide. So you can decide whether they have enough technical and soft skills that is required for this particular role. I believe a good interviewer is a good listener. So listen to their answers, and based on them, you can drive the direction of the interview. Take notes by carefully listening to their questions, especially the questions. Either take a pen and a paper or just use a software and specially take note of these questions, because the questions unravel their true interest, such as career progressions, responsibilities, or the work culture that they want to get into. If they already see themselves working with you, it's a very positive attitude that you need to appreciate. So take note of such things that would be highly valuable when you're providing your feedback. Another great characteristic of any interviewer, I would say, is the honesty and truthfulness. During an interview, for someone to say, "No, I don't know that. I honestly have no expertise in that area, but I'm willing to learn," it takes a lot of courage. It also saves time and effort for both parties, as the candidate for them and as the interviewer for us as well. This can change the entire narrative and the entire interviewing experience for everyone. So, this is something we need to highly appreciate, a really good quality that the candidate has, because they are improving the entire experience for all the parties that is involved. This could be the deciding point whether the interviews could be continued or not, whether this particular role is suitable enough for that particular candidate or not. So either just use your body language or just use simple words and appreciate this beautiful quality of the candidates, because not all of them have that. And during an interview, cliche, yes, you need to dress to impress, because first impressions are the best impressions. Don't forget that you're representing not only yourself but your organization. This could be the first time that you're meeting the interviewee, the candidate, and they are meeting you as well. So put in the same effort that they put in. They are taking time to decide what to wear and how to how to do their hair and everything. So return the same energy and put in the same effort, especially if this is a video call. Try to dress up as well, because it will help you to maintain a positive attitude throughout the entire call. One thing I tried was wearing colors such as yellow that bring out optimism and inspiring hope and enthusiasm. It actually made me feel good, and even the candidate felt like I was a very friendly and a very easygoing person because of the color that I decided to dress up on that day. When we talk about the appearances, it's not only about what you wear, but also your body language. So always work on your body language, improve your posture, and always use proper gestures and good body language to convey the correct message. While you work on yours, don't forget to focus on the candidate's body language as well, because sometimes rather than expressing their feelings in words, the body language tells us a very different and a very authentic story. So don't forget to pay close attention to that. Now that you know how to conduct the interview, we have only one step to go after the one step to complete after the interviews if you are not involved in the HR aspect. That is sharing feedback. This is the phase that all your notes and all the things that you note down will come in handy. One other thing I would suggest is don't wait too much. Don't take too much time to provide the feedback. Try to provide the feedback immediately, because otherwise you might forget important details, important things that were discussed during the interview session. One thing I learned from my current organization is during an interview, as interviewers, we should never judge a candidate for who they are right now. If you're a good interviewer, we should have the ability to see their true potential. We should hire them for who they can be and for who they can grow up to be with. This is an extremely important point to consider, especially when we are providing feedback. So take your time and provide an honest evaluation on the entire experience so that the company and even your senior managers can make an easy decision. Last but not least, this is an extra tip that I want to share with everyone, no matter whether you are an experienced or an inexperienced interviewer. There's no such thing as a perfect interviewer or interviewee. So don't be too hard on yourself. Don't be too hard on the candidate also. Always be unbiased and never forget that we are all humans. Each interview, each video conference that we have is a learning opportunity for us, for the candidate as well. So make the most out of it, and don't be too hard on yourself, but keep growing. So, those are the few simple tips that I wanted to share today with you to make your interviewing process a smooth one and have a successful interviewing process. I really hope you found all these tips helpful and you will be able to use them one day during your interviews. I shared them in the order that they were helpful to me, and I made sure I customized them so that they will be helpful in selecting the best technical writing candidate. I know there are a lot of plenty other tips that you follow, and maybe you will want to share your tips with me, and maybe you have feedback on this talk. So, in that case, don't forget to reach out to me. Don't hesitate to reach out to me on my LinkedIn, or you can reach out to me through my Medium blogs as well. Thank you for joining my talk, and until next time, happy interviewing.
Hey everyone, welcome to the last Q&A session for Write the Docs 2022. We're joined here by Ishara and Alex. Thank you both for joining.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for having us.
All right, let's get stuck into some questions. I might start with you, Ishara, actually. I think people really got a lot out of your sort of top tips for interviewing, because it's a hard thing to do, interviewing candidates. So I actually have a question that I pose is, what would be your favorite or most valuable question that you ask when you're doing a technical writer interview?
I think, like, personally for me, it is the first question, like, please tell me something about yourself, introduce yourself, because that would be the icebreaker for the entire session, and that would give the first impression to me. So it's always bad to judge, but I get either it's a good feeling or positive impression or a negative one. We could easily figure that out from the very first sentence itself. So that is my favorite part.
Oh, interesting. So you think you can get a fair few insights out of a person based on sort of how they interact in that first engagement. Very interesting.
Yeah, kind of.
What do you think about questioning style as well? There's a couple of different ways you can do it. Like a good example was that one that you said, tell us a bit about yourself, that sort of leading style question. But have you tried other style of interviewing techniques, like tell me about a time when sort of questions in the interviewing process, and what have you found more effective there?
So I would say it's mostly not the type of the question, but the type of style that we follow. So one thing I always try to do is get the candidate to talk more, rather than I'm explaining what's happening inside the organization. I get them to ask more questions, so that it gives a really good insight on what they have in their mind and what they want to know. Uh, I have actually tried that the latter part of what you suggested, like tell me about a time that things were hard or things like that. So they were really helpful when you were interviewing someone with a bit of experience. But for a fresh graduate, that wouldn't be the case. So in my case, I always interviewed for the entry level technical writers. So I always ask questions about their final year work or university work, or how they work with their teams inside the university or college, things like that. That also actually gives a really good insight, especially if you don't have a lot of experience. I wouldn't follow that style. Yeah.
That's a good point. You need to tailor the interview for the type of candidate you have. That's a really good point. I might switch over to you now, Alex, if I may. So one question was asked, and it's this one. It's knowing that product docs are part of the pre-sale experience. How can we make sure our docs are suited to that context as part of the PLG?
Well, that's a really great question. So kudos to whoever asked that one. So your content shouldn't change. I don't think that the content itself should change, but that it should be, because you're not going to have two separate sets of docs, right? One that's like, say, in the product and serving people post sales and pre-sales. I think that the thing that should change is the entry point, right? So once someone has already been in the docs, they might go through. If you don't have an in-app widget, excuse me, then they'll most likely, bookmark the page or have a favorite page they go to, and they're already in, right? Like a direct, they get in directly. But if someone is just laying there, you want to give them different entry points that talk to their use cases. So I think once they're in there, once you're in documentation, you expect a certain thing. Now, let's say you have someone like a CISO, and I'm going to use the cybersecurity example. If you have a CISO looking what this product is, they're thinking about spending, $200,000, $400,000 on a multi-year deal for a product. They just want to make sure it checks certain boxes. They're not going to get into how to configure this integration and where's the API. They're not going to get into that. Maybe the practitioners will. So it needs to speak to them, but at the same time, you need to have some CISO level information that would be more entry point stuff. And then obviously have a really good search for practitioners or people that are actually going to be using it. But I don't think the content should necessarily change. You don't have to change the style. It should still, and this is what we discussed with UX writing and why it's one of the pillars, is because the voice should match from the .com through the documentation site through the product. It has to be all the way through, or else you get a Jekyll and Hyde type of experience, which might be fun, but can be slightly discomforting for customers.
Absolutely. That's really good insights there. Thank you for that. There's one more question that came through as well, which would be, what would be the most effective place to start out in PLG strategy that might help sell the idea to the business if they're perhaps not quite sure about what they should do?
Yeah, so it's very difficult. People say, like, there are lots of PLG leaders. So first of all, if you're interested in PLG as a topic, just check out that hashtag in LinkedIn, on Substack. There are really great leaders that you can learn a lot quickly from. But if it's not an organizational thing, it's a company strategy, an organizational go-to-market strategy. Obviously, you would have to convince the sales team that they're not needed as much, which is very difficult. But it also goes with the product planning, or what kind of features are being planned, what's being prioritized in engineering, things like this. So it's not just a documentation or knowledge experience problem or thing to solve. So if the whole company is not on board, like we discussed early on in the talk, then it's just not going to happen. But if you do want to give it a go and show that you can be part of the lead generation and customer acquisition process, don't get anyone's permission. Just build it, side project. That's why I do docs as product strategy, or content as product strategy. Build a proof of concept and show how it's going to work. And it's much harder to say no to something that you've shown works than trying to sell an idea for something that's so out of the realm of what they've been doing.
Show it, don't tell it. That's a good advice. Absolutely. And one last question. This one was from Swapnil. He was saying that he's a really big fan of evangelizing, particularly when it comes to documentation, because I think a lot of us sort of fail to do that sometimes. He was wondering why and how can you actually effectively advocate for your work as part of a PLG?
Again, really, it's a good question. It's a tough question. You can do this with metrics, right? Like you can show where things have gone. Also, if you are in touch with the marketing teams, meaning you're not an island as a knowledge experience team. When you're going PLG, you're in touch much more with the marketers, with sales to find out. And so your site should be added to whatever they're monitoring for lead generation, meaning like if on your docs page you have book a demo or get started or log into or start with the product and they can do it from there, then I want to see how many leads are being generated from documentation, how many are not. The thing about evangelizing, and all documentarians know this, if a user goes to documentation and does not find what they need a single time, they lose confidence almost immediately. It's like if you go to, let's just say, an Italian restaurant and they screw up the pasta with marinara sauce, you're not going to give them the second chance, because that's what they should be doing, right? On a basic level. So we have to get it right from the beginning, and that doesn't mean you can't have mistakes, but we have to make sure that we get our basics down and that we're building customer confidence in our documentation and our knowledge deliverables wherever they are. So that's the beginning, I think, to evangelizing.
Right. That's really just start with the basics. Sounds like. Yeah, really good. Well, look, I think that brings us to a close for the Q&A session and indeed for the official parts of Write the Docs 2022. Thank you to you both for coming in and joining us for the last Q&A session. It's been great having a chat with you. And for folks who are looking to stay around and perhaps explore some topics that they might have heard of in the conference over the last 2 days, the platform's going to remain open for a couple of more hours yet. So you still have a little bit of time to catch up with people in the hallways and the different rooms and get involved as the conference closes down. But just want to say thank you to everyone. It's been a pleasure hosting. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you next year. And until then, Docs or it didn't happen.